I love sky blue. I think that's probably my favorite color. My name is Hamid, and I'm an artist. The areas that I focus are in architecture, as well as environment and figure. And through my work, I'm trying to convey a sense of positivity and optimism. And one of the statements that I made was, the year is 2020 and humanity still has a lot to learn. What I mean by that is that there's a lot of onus on us as individuals and as people to take charge of making the world more habitable, more cohesive. I think there's a lot that people can take on. The idea that time goes by and we have more technology doesn't necessarily translate to better lives for people. I think that we have to really understand that the communications we have between each other is a big part of our growth as people. And this also includes how we interact with the environment. It's not just a process of take. So I think that we have to be able to provide back as well. I've always created art from a very young age, and I've done illustration. I've loved doing animation. I even thought I would become an animator when I was very young. So there's fine art, and then there's animation, which is more to do with motion and a story. So I actually love both. It's just the path that I'm currently on is more toward the art as opposed to animation, but I think there's still a story inherent in the work that I'm communicating. When I was studying architecture, I lived in Germany, and at that time I was basically, I would travel on weekends. So if I ever had a weekend or there was a long weekend, I would take 3 days and go and see a new city. So lots of different cities. I went to Rome, I went to Paris, Czech Republic, and Prague. So any of these cities that I went to, I would go and visit their galleries, and I thought that it's beautiful to see that. I think as a visitor, you can appreciate it. And then now, being on the other side of producing the art, you actually realize how much work it takes and how much thought it takes to put that on. It's as a visitor, it looks like it's beautiful. It just got there, it just showed up. But I think as a practitioner, you realize that there's a lot that goes behind, a lot of thought that goes into it and showing you that beautiful thing, which is, something that obviously people can benefit from. I have a background in architecture, so I use that idea to create some spaces or environments that communicate a sense of hope, optimism, and happiness. Because I think that happiness is also, for me, sort of counter to a lot of the negativity that we're fed, and using, again, figures, environments, spaces, colors. These are sort of the areas that I have in the palette that I've kind of developed to be able to communicate these ideas. I actually love sky blue. I think that I'm just drawn toward it. It's sort of like this, blue sky thinking, and I think that also speaks to the visual language and the optimism that I'm talking about. So a blue sky, obviously the sun, yellow, so I have some of that in my work as well, and green, which is, more of a natural color. So I think there's certain colors, and especially I think I gravitate toward brighter colors, just as a sort of way to reinforce the happiness and optimism that I'm trying to communicate. The idea being that, someone that's from a different culture or from a different background can still relate to this work. It's not specific to someone, who's from Toronto, let's say. It's not specific to that. But I have been influenced by lots of different visual artists, like I think Henry Matisse, Salvador Dali. In terms of environmental work, I think that I really like Richard Serra's work because it's very minimalist, it's large, it's to do with the environment and falls within that. So Monet as an impressionist artist, I find a lot of times I'm drawn toward that. And as I mentioned, Dali, because there's some subconscious sort of ideas that I think that can be explored. So in regards to my process, basically a lot of times I'll have a certain idea that comes to me while I'm in a certain space. And for example, the paintings behind me, there was one where it's a field of flowers, and I basically removed everything except for the flowers to create a landscape. So that was something that sort of, I had this vision in the moment that I was in the space, and then I took a picture, and then I went back to the studio and started to create that. Other times I'll have ideas where I'm drawing in my sketchbook because I draw every day, and then I'll find that an idea comes to me and I see something that speaks to me out of the sketchbook, and then I will create that on a larger scale, essentially doing like a test piece, and then I can sometimes scale things up. And that's sort of how I create some of those pieces that are a little bit bigger. Sometimes I work with words and a thought will come to me and I write it down, and then sometimes I will, narrow it down to a certain idea. And a lot of times I find I work on with acrylic on paper to sort of get a certain idea, or think about, the colors, the layout, and what I want to do, and then I can create that. Sometimes I work with oil on canvas as well, depending on what sort of effect I want. And depending upon sort of the message, I'll choose the medium that's right for it. Yeah, the relationship to paintings, basically I've, sometimes it'll be a certain underlay that comes down, and then I work over top and do line work and create that, and to get a certain effect. The process, and sometimes what I find is actually it's very interesting to get to really just surprise yourself. Let's say you have a certain idea and you want to see how it actually looks, and then you put it on paper or on canvas, and then you're a little bit surprised, and that's very exciting too, because you don't necessarily know 100% what you're going to get. You're going to be it's an experiment sometimes, where you're learning or you're testing things, and then you create something. So I think that my creative practice is very important for me personally, and it's important to pursue my ideas because it is a certain language or form of communication that I have, and I feel like it's a way that I can speak with people, communicate visually, including my thoughts and ideas. And so the routine that I've created is to come into the studio and work for several hours in the day and produce different pieces. And in terms of the importance of art to me personally, I think that first of all, it's an aspect of communication and development of ideas, but the other part is that there's a therapeutic aspect to art, that I think it actually helps people in their growth, in their psychological growth, in their emotional and spiritual growth. So I think that there's a lot of areas where people who create art can benefit from that, and people who view it can also benefit from that. Yeah, so with the Kin Collective, basically I was visiting an art gallery and I saw that they were doing what's called an art crawl, where basically the group goes to different art galleries and visits the gallery. I started talking with some of the artists that I saw there, and they mentioned, we have studio spaces, and that's how I got started. And the group is actually incredible. It's really good to have, other artists who you can either, speak to get their advice on something. You can get feedback. You can bounce ideas off of each other. Even just as friends, you have, people that you can talk to. This person, let's say they have a certain technique, you can learn from that, or, a certain skill about painting, or what material to use, or, there's so much that can actually be benefited from artists speaking to each other and sort of communicating. And that's sort of what I found to be a benefit of a King Collective.